Well, here we have the first of 4 challenges, and we've got to find the domain and range of this function and its inverse function, and also we have to find f inverse. So let's start with f of x equals x over 5x plus 2. And now let's see, we'll deal with the domain and range. So we've got f and f inverse and domain and range. And the domain of f, well, what value of x will take that to denominator to 0? Well, negative 2/5 will. So x cannot equal negative 2/5. All reals but negative 2/5. So the range for the inverse function is y, which cannot equal all reals except y equaling negative 2/5. Now the range for this function, the horizontal asymptote, occurs at 1/5, so it's y cannot equal 1/5. So all reals except 1/5. So the domain of the inverse function will be x, such that x cannot equal 1/5. In other words, all reals except for 1/5. So now we'll replace f of x with y, and we get x over 5x plus 2. And now we'll exchange x and y, and we get x equals y over 5y plus 2. This is the inverse function, but we've got to solve for y, and we'll replace y with f inverse of x. So let's multiply both sides by this denominator, and we get x times 5y plus 2, which equals y. Now we'll multiply through by x, we'll distribute that x, and we get 5xy plus 2x equals y. Now, subtracting 2x from both sides and subtracting y from both sides, in other words, getting all the terms incorporating y on one side, everything else on the other. Now, factoring out a y, we get y times 5x minus 1 equals negative 2x. And now we'll divide through by this factor 5x minus 1, and we isolate y. And so that equals negative 2x over 5x minus 1. Now, we want to get rid of that negative sign, and we can do that if we just factor a negative out of each of these terms in the denominators. So y equals negative 2x over negative, and changing the sign on, when we factor out a negative, we change the sign on each term, so that'll be a plus 1. Changing the sign on positive 5x, that'll be a negative 5x. And now the negatives divide out, and we get y equals 2x over 1 minus 5x. So f inverse, we're going to claim f inverse of x equals 2x over 1 minus 5x. Now let's check it out. Let's make sure we have the correct domain and range. So the domain of this inverse function is all reals except 1/5. And notice we've excluded 1/5 from the domain. The horizontal asymptote occurs at negative 2/5, so we have to exclude y equals negative 2/5 from the range, and we've done that, so we're good. We've done it. So for our second question, we must graph the exponential equation f of x equals minus 5 to the x minus 2. And we've got to label the y-intercept and f of 1. So first off, this is an exponential function. There are no variables in the denominator. There are no variables under a square root symbol. So the domain is all reals, or negative infinity to infinity. Now, what if this negative 2 wasn't here, or this negative symbol? If we just had y equals 5 to the x to graph, here's what it would look like. Goes very steep. Okay. Now, what's the horizontal asymptote for this? It is y equals 0, or the x-axis. When we take into account that negative 2, then we have to drop this horizontal asymptote down 2 units. So the new horizontal asymptote will be y equals negative 2, and here we are at 0, negative 2. And there's our horizontal asymptote. This negative sign in front of the 5x says flip this thing over the horizontal asymptote. So now let's find the y-intercept. So we'll let x be 0. When x is 0, 5 to the 0 is 1. A negative in front of that, that's negative 1 minus 2 is 0, negative 3. Now let's find f of 1. Replacing x with 1, we get 5 to the first, which is 5, but we've got a negative in front of that, so that's negative 5. Minus 2 is negative 7. So here we are at 1, negative 7. Now we're ready to graph. And here we go. It's very steep. Oh, let me make an adjustment. That should be 1. Here we are. 1, negative 7. Misplaced that point. Now, here we go. And there, the domain's all reals, so we're going from negative infinity to infinity, and we're done.